Morning, everyone. I am Michelle Langa. I am the shared staff attorney at New York, New Jersey Baykeeper and Hackensack Riverkeeper, and I co-chair the CSO committee with Andy Kirkin. I want to thank everyone for attending this Connect and Learn with the NJ Office of Emergency Management and the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency Region 2. It's co-hosted by the Jersey Waterworks Climate Resilience and Combined Sewer Overflow Committees, both of which aim to support utilities and municipalities through the sharing of resources. And we are very excited to learn from today's experts. So we're going to start with about 20 minutes from NJOEM, followed by a Q&A. And then EPA Region 2 will present, and then will be time for Q&A after that as well. So please write down your questions, drop them in the chat if you'd like, and we'll keep track so that we can get everybody answers that they need. And I will now welcome Christopher Testa from NJOEM as our first presenter.
Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Hoping everyone is staying cool. But let's go ahead and get right into it. If you guys could fire up that PowerPoint, that'd be great. So intro for myself. Again, my name is Christopher Testa, Chris Testa. I am the Hazard Mitigation Unit Manager here in the Office of Emergency Management, which resides within the New Jersey State Police. We're the primary conduit for various FEMA funding sources, and that's where I'll start kind of walking through those, talking about those. But really what we want to discuss today is opportunities for resilience projects in CSOs and CSO communities and FEMA's HMA, which is their Hazard Mitigation Assistance Program. Go ahead, next slide. So that photograph that you're looking at there, that's actually the Northwest Resilience Park in Hoboken. Multiple federal and state agencies have funding there, but it's the first time FEMA's really stepped foot into that realm, and it's a great opportunity to sort of teach off of that learned experience. So before I get too into my FEMA speak, I'll just lay out a couple of the big grant programs, right? This would be opportunities to seek funding for your resilience or your hazard mitigation project within your system. So HMA is hazard mitigation assistance. That's sort of the overarching name for all of these things. Then we have FMA. FMA is the Flood Mitigation Assistance Program. Those benefit NFIP insured properties and are linked to NFIP insured properties. PDMC is sort of a ghost program. It's been brought back primarily for federal congressional earmarks, right? But that has been sunset with the newer program, which is BRIC. BRIC is the Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities Program. That is FEMA's pre-disaster primary method of attempting to address hazard mitigation prior to a disaster as opposed to after a disaster. The after disaster program is HMGP. That's the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program. And that takes 15% of the total of a couple of FEMA categories of damages and puts that into mitigation. Go ahead, next slide. So BRIC is probably going to be, if I was in the CSO community, the place where I would start to look for funding. What BRIC is based on is 6% of the nation's total in any given disaster, cumulative. So all the disasters in the country, 6% of that is the funding point for the following year's BRIC, right? Up to 6%. In the last couple of cycles, it's been in the billions. And obviously, with climate change and instability in our weather patterns, we're seeing a lot more declared disasters, both here in New Jersey and nationwide, right? So the worse the year that the country has, the better the year that BRIC funding theoretically could have. I just read a piece yesterday, U.S. Chamber of Commerce, right, which is maybe not the greenest of groups, but even they came around to say that there are $13 of benefits for every dollar put into hazard mitigation. Some of that is in avoided damages, and some of it is just in the pure stimulative effect, job creation, work that gets done to bring some resilience into the overall portfolio of the nation's infrastructure and communities. Next slide. New Jersey's done very well in BRIC. We're number 2 in the number of applications submitted nationally. We're fifth in funding. You can see that the mapping there. Um, in my tenure post Sandy, we're about 1.1, $1.2 billion in FEMA funding for hazard mitigation. About 55 to 60% of that has actually been competitive, right around there. So we do very well in those competitive programs, in FMA, in BRIC, and I think it's a credit to the density of engineers and scientists and grants writers and planners here, in the region and in New Jersey proper, where we're a little bit ahead of the rest of the country in finding problems and seeking solutions. So again, I think that's pertinent to the folks on the call now. But this is something we've got a pretty good level of experience doing. I've got a 14-person staff and an entire stable of consultants that we use to get this done. So if you are thinking about this, if you have a project in mind, if there's something that you need to do either through a consent decree or a long-term management plan, whatever it is that you're looking at, it may be worth a conversation with myself or somebody on my staff to see if there are opportunities within the FEMA world to achieve some co-benefits. FEMA is primarily going to be looking at natural hazard risk reduction. In most of these cases, is probably going to be flooding or some sort of a power outage, right? That's going to be the primary drivers. But there's a lot of collateral benefits into the water quality sphere, into quality of life, into urban heat islands. All these things sort of become interconnected at some point. So that's definitely something we're also interested in looking at. And as we kind of move through the presentation, I'll show you some examples in that Hoboken system where there's a lot of co-benefits there. All right, next slide. Who can apply? So an eligible subgrantees, state agencies, local governments, federally recognized tribes, nonprofit NGOs, right? To be eligible, you have to have participated in your hazard mitigation plan. In New Jersey, those are organized at the county level, and each municipality will have its own annex or section within the plan. It's an opportunity for them to tell their story. Moving forward, we're actually in the process of rethinking our guidance for local hazard mitigation planning, and we're going to create a special districts section, right? So if your municipality participated, that's great. I can get money to the municipality, but I cannot get you a direct award from FEMA if you are an MUA or an authority, independent subdivision of the state of New Jersey, right? You have to have participated in the plan. I'm in the process of reintroducing or rebringing back an MUA into a certain county plan right now, right? So there's a mechanism to do it, just takes a little longer. So think through that. Did you participate in the plan? Have you adopted your county's hazard mitigation plan? Yes or no? Okay, next slide. So a couple of different categories of places where common project types emerge, right? So thinking through CSOs and where things would come into line and how I would build that into, say, a BRIC application. Flood control, right? The flood component of a CSO offers us some really interesting opportunities to link benefits, right? And it offers us an opportunity to attack a flood really from the bottom up, right? I would be super happy, but I wouldn't expect to find a CSO project that was going to address a 50 or 100-year level event, right? But we can certainly find damage reduction and benefits in high frequency, low impact events, 2, 5, 10-year events. And that's probably where the cost benefit cost curve aligns properly, right? You start trying to get up into high volume events, you need a lot of space, and you need a lot of resources, right? Which may exceed sort of the mission of a CSO, right? Or a sewage treatment facility. So we can think about the low end of the equation. We can start to leverage the disruption of the plant. We can start to think through discharges. It gives us a lot more flexibility in building a benefit cost analysis around some of these investments, right? We can look at retrofits, right? How do we retrofit this facility to be more resilient? It's probably not going to be new digesters or things on the treatment side of the operation, but it can certainly be plumbing. We paid for a significant amount of the plumbing in Northwest Resilience. It can also be storage and the ability to kind of park water and to disrupt a typical urban storm hydrograph, a super high peak, or we want to flatten that out. We want to reduce and retard flows. We want to park some water in places where it doesn't do a lot of damage and get around to treating and discharging that water in a manner that's consistent with the community's flood goals, right? Not having impassable streets or water in basements or first floors, right? So a lot of opportunities there. And then just utility and infrastructure protection is a listed class within BRIC. So keeping these facilities up and operational, and that's where we start to look at redundant power supplies, microgrids, things along that line, in addition to supplementing the treatment train. Go ahead, next slide. So other issues to consider: duplication of program. There's a restriction in most federal programs that you cannot sort of use federal money with federal money if they're duplicating each other's mission or cause. What we have done in the past is sort of create separate and discrete scopes of work within larger projects. That's what we did in Northwest Resilience. Um, as you'll see some of the slides coming up, there's a lot of really interesting community amenities and a lot of green infrastructure that went into those projects from FEMA's standpoint. And FEMA literally made that project the poster child for BRIC. It was funded in the last year of the PDM program sort of sunsetting. And FEMA did storyboards on it and did all kinds of PR around, this is what we want BRIC to be. When we initially submitted that to Region 2, the first comment that came back was, this is a duplication of program. You're way leaning into EPA's realm. There's EPA money there. There's DEP money that utilizes federally backed funds. But what we did was create a discrete scope of work. We firewalled it off from other funding sources, and basically we just looked at, somebody mute that out, please. Thank you. We just looked at about 1 million gallons plus of storage and the plumbing to get the water there. Everything else in that scope of work was outside of our FEMA BCA and what FEMA went on to support and fund, right? By eliminating all that additional stuff, we said only FEMA money will be used to pay for these elements. Anything else is out there is outside of our scope. It's not going to be a duplication of program because FEMA is really only paying for the flood risk reduction portion of the project, which again was 1 million gallons of subsurface storage, right? Has to have a mitigation risk and natural hazard, not about water quality, right? Water quality is going to be a secondary benefit, but FEMA is definitely looking at the natural hazard component. Is the flood going to take this offline? Is water that was going to enter the treatment train causing flooding? Things like that, right? Benefit cost analysis. Any federally funded project through FEMA has to have a BCA of a 1+, right? So for every dollar we put in, we need a dollar and a penny's worth of benefits when it is built over time. Again, challenges and opportunities here. Because it's a complex system, there are a lot of ways to sort of link benefits to doing what I described, right? Slowing down some water, putting water somewhere where it's not going to be harmful, treating it later, not overwhelming the plant. So can we keep water out of basements and streets? Can we not disrupt the operation of the facility itself? Can we avoid those discharges, right? And then we can leverage that into things like, do we have business disruption? Do we have a loss of services? Are there environmental benefits associated with some of the things, some of the BMPs that we're putting in to mitigate the flood risk or some of the treatment requirements, right? So there's a lot of different ways, a lot of opportunities there, but also some risks, right? And I think one of the risks is that sewage treatment plant operators don't always think kind of in that way, right? Your primary job is clean water. So it can be a little bit of a mental leap kind of to get into the other benefits that we would be focusing on. I think there's some good opportunities with some of the MS4 regulations. There's some overlap there with data sources, and that's kind of how we've been successful in using data that's already there to leverage and build BCAs and build better scopes of work, right, to achieve more benefits with what we're putting into it. Understanding your data gaps and needs. We have kind of three big ones of these going on right now. There's a big project we've got funded in Camden. We're working in Hackensack, Two Rivers MUA. We've got some money down there. These things are usually more successful or easier to pull off when we have really robust data sets. My Hackensack project has hyper detailed square footage values for um, square footage below grade. What's your basement square footage worth? Similarly, in Hoboken, with a lot of below grade apartments or things like that, it offers up the opportunity to start to gain flood resilience with smaller events, right? With a 2-year, 5-year, 10-year event, as opposed to, typically in my line of work, we don't start seeing a lot of flood risk reduction benefit till we get 10, 25, 50-year events. Is where the damage curves really start to spike, where you start to see if water gets in your first floor, it's going to be catastrophic versus a basement, right? But in denser urban areas, typical of CSO, we have we have some opportunities there, right? Because we can, a little bit of risk reduction, a little bit of storage goes a long way in those areas because of the sensitivity. Go ahead, next slide. Okay, here's Northwest Resilience. Multiple funding sources and the iBank. There's EPA money there. There's EPA pass-through money to DEP. There's iBank money there, and there's some FEMA money there. Really, really interesting in that, this case study is a former brownfield site. It was contaminated. The apartment buildings that used to be mill buildings, industrial buildings, sort of adjacent to the facility, were under construction when we started construction, and they were going for $450,000 to $550,000 in there. They added about a 30% value when the project started nearing completion, because this is the largest piece of open space in Hoboken, right? So there are, again, collateral benefits, right? A lot of additional benefits if done right. A lot of community engagement and visioning to get to what that facility is and the use of that facility. I mean, it's a really interesting way to hide a subsurface treatment storage fight, right? From a FEMA standpoint, that project was driven by the flood risk reduction. But again, a massive amount of collateral benefits. It's your largest park. It's got a lot of recreational utility. It does have a fair amount of green space there. It is some open space. When it's mature and vegetated, it'll have trees and a canopy and a lot of other green space in an area that doesn't have an awful lot of green space, right? So this is the upside of the potential opportunities, right? A well thought out design, a well thought out plan, good community engagement, a project that works and achieves some resilience and some natural hazard risk reduction. That's a win. If you think you have that, I certainly encourage everyone to reach out. We'll talk through it. I probably have about a dozen ongoing conversations with people just thinking through kind of their asset and facility portfolio and where the opportunities are within that. Go ahead, next slide. So here's what that subsurface storage looks like. Right, that's the underground portion. That's what does the work. Again, independent of sort of everything above grade, right? You don't need a basketball court that doubles as a detention basin, but you got one because you got the benefits of taking, 1 million gallons of water, parking it underground, and then treating it later. We can look at traffic disruption. We can look at systems disruption, plant damage itself. Do we avoid damage to the plant? The environmental benefits of avoiding overflows. Discharge into waterways is not a good thing, right? There's fines involved with that, and then there's an economic impact to that as well. If you start closing down beaches in the summertime, you start limiting reuse of those waterways, you damage the ecosystem, or commercial fish stocks, things like that. The benefits of doing this the right way are pretty profound, right? So again, in operating in a system, there's a lot of opportunities for collateral benefits. It allows us, again, that bottom-up approach to looking at the BCA. It doesn't just all have to be, well, we protected the plant and facility. We can look at the cost of the disruption for those homeowners, the avoiding pumping sewage back through the system, right, or overflows inside of structures. There's a lot of ways, and I'm preaching to the choir here. You guys know where the wheels come off when these things go bad. Um, but we can definitely start to think through solutions to that problem and make sure we capture all of those benefits when we go to a federal funding partner to say, this is not a linear, wow, if we build this wall, this facility is protected. It's a little more complex than that. But in that complexity, there's a lot more opportunities actually to really leverage benefits. Water projects for us, either potable or sanitary, tend to be our highest scoring BCA projects, right? The cost to society to replace those and the impacts of when these things go offline are pretty substantial, right? So it's definitely cost effective to keep them operational, leverage them for additional flood abatement where possible, and avoid them coming offline and having, unregulated discharges or, you know, direct discharge of untreated effluent into water bodies. Go ahead, next slide. So this is an example. This is if you're interested in that Northwest Resilience site or any of the resilience parks in Hoboken, they have their own web pages. They have webcams. Hoboken did an amazing job of really publicizing what they're doing a lot of stakeholder engagement and outreach. And they've got a comprehensive plan sort of across the community to look at resilience. It complements the Rebuild by Design project there, but they're thinking through their overall risk, and trying to come up with logical solutions, building assets out of those examples, putting green space in an urban area, and thinking through a systematic approach to try to address the impacts of climate change and sort of the natural hazards that community faces. So it's encouraging. I think they've done one of the best jobs in the state of kind of thinking that through. They've got access to a lot of assets, that helps as well. But I think we can all learn from those examples and try to implement some of that stuff in other communities. Again, we're in talks with Camden. We've got some things in design there, Hackensack, and a couple other places, right? So it's a very, very challenging environment. I probably don't have to tell you guys that. But again, I think if you look at it in the right lens, there's also a lot of opportunity there to try to bring some federal dollars in to assist and again build out a portfolio of a lot of different benefits where a lot of stakeholders are benefiting positively. The environment gets improved, bring a little like additional tax dollars back to New Jersey, but ultimately, maintain or improve the quality of life for residents and citizens. That's what I got, guys. So I'm available for questions.
Good morning, everybody. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Look good? Great, great. So again, I'm Kurt Baranowski, and I work on EPA's Creating Resilient Water Utilities Initiative. I'm in EPA's Office of Water. And so what I want to do today is kind of give you a background on what we do, how we do it. Certainly, if you have questions along the way or at the end, happy to answer them, and I'm always available for questions, so don't hesitate to reach out to me. So what we do under what I'll refer to as CREW, Creating Resilient Water Utilities Initiative, is we're taking existing climate science data and we're putting it into usable formats for drinking water, wastewater, and stormwater utilities to use so that they can get a better understanding of what their potential future looks like. So for utilities, excuse me, utilities in New Jersey, sea level rise, precipitation, hot days, all that sort of data. And I'll go over some of the data later on that we provide to utilities, to take a look at that and then start to plan to adapt to what their potential future looks like. So we're not getting into mitigation of greenhouse gas emissions. Certainly some of the work that a utility could do could result in that, but we're all about adaptation. We're all voluntary. We work with many partners. We've been in existence for over 15 years. We've worked with all types of federal agencies, drinking water, wastewater, stormwater utilities of all sizes across the nation because we are a nationwide program, and many other partners in the water sector. So a lot of good work that's gone on over the past 15 years or so, and we're continuing on. So that's really great. So I want to talk about some of the work that we do before I get into some of our tools and resources. So One of the things that we do under CREW is to provide direct technical assistance to water sector utilities. If you look to the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see the number of utilities that we get to. I know that doesn't seem like a lot based on the number of systems that are there across the United States. However, one of the things that we like to do is, as we work with these utilities, as they become an advocate for our program, and all the tools and resources that we have built out are usable by any individual at a utility, but certainly EPA is there for technical assistance if they choose to or if they need help. We provide this technical assistance. Here are some of the requirements under it. It can take approximately 2 to 4 months. We do in-person as well as virtual meetings, working with utilities. Typically, the virtual meetings are about 2 hours, and we bring in all sorts of subject matter experts to assist. So climate science experts, engineers. We do a lot of this work through contractors because we're a small group of 5 people at under the CREW initiative. This is just the screenshot that just popped up on the side here is some of the funding opportunities that we provide or that the government provides under CREW. I'll talk more about that in a minute because there's a lot of, I think, interesting connects to some of the information that Chris shared that we also try to incorporate into our actual technical assistance process. But just in particular, talking about BRIC, we work with a few folks, in particular, Josh Human, who is headquarters point of contact for DHS's BRIC or FEMA's BRIC program. And we bring funders into the process so that a utility isn't sort of left high and dry. It's great if we can provide them with information on how to adapt to their potential future, but of course they need to know how to fund these adaptive measures. So we're doing a tremendous amount of work about bringing some of those funders in, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later on. I always like to show this. This is a case studies map that we provide. It's really easy to use. It's Esri-based. You just go in, you can type in your zip code or the types of climate concerns you're concerned with, and you'll see a number of the utilities that we've worked with over the many years that we've been in existence and been providing technical assistance. And we've done a tremendous amount of work in New Jersey. We've worked with Southern Monmouth Sewage Authority, Passaic Valley, Atlantic City, Hoboken, Trenton, Camden, Suez, and Haworth, New Jersey. And we're working this summer with Asbury Park. And we're actually not working with the utility. We're working with the municipality to look at stormwater runoff from all the construction and pavement that's occurring more on the east side of the city, and the stormwater runoff problems that that's creating on the east side of the city, not only due to less permeable ground cover, but then also increased precipitation. So Asbury Park is experiencing a lot of flooding problems on the east side of the city. So it's going to be interesting to take a look at that. We're going to start working with them sometime in mid-July. So again, that's just another screenshot. And we provide case studies for each one of these systems that we work with, so you can take a look at that. And all this information will be provided, links to all of this later on. I'll share the PowerPoint with all of you so you can share it with the group. We also provide workshop trainings. So instead of getting into an in-depth technical assistance analysis with utilities, we provide typically and now in person one-day workshops for multiple utilities. We usually have somewhere between 20 to 40 utilities in a room. We continue to, of course, work with folks in Region 2. I'm not exactly sure where we're going to go in FY25, but I know that we have good budget. Luckily, I was able to grab up some money on the bipartisan infrastructure law to do some of this work this year. So, or I should say in FY25. So if you're interested in working with us, don't hesitate to reach out to us. And I have a lot of contacts in New Jersey DEP, so I've been keeping them up to speed on what we're doing, and they're very interested in some of the work that we're doing with many utilities across the U.S. Some of the training that we've provided over the years has also been virtual. We've captured that, we've put it up on our website. So I would encourage you to take a look at that. A lot of training on our tools and resources, and it's all regionalized by climate region. So I think that's really helpful too for users. This is sort of a side note, but a very interesting side note. We're working with a bunch of financial sector and insurance sector folks on how to look at insurability, bond ratings as it relates to climate resilience in the water sector. We have a group of about 20 people from all of these sectors, including the water sector, that are focusing in on this. I would encourage you to kind of take a look at our initial report. We're in the process of issuing a follow-up report based on an in-person meeting that we just had in May. So a lot of really good work going on there, and we plan to kind of do a bit of a roadshow in FY25, which for us starts October 1. Going to different conferences to talk about this. A lot of the financial sector folks are really interested in spreading the word because it's an important subject matter for many utilities. So that's sort of the background on what we do, who we are, and I'm going to talk a little bit about our tools and resources now. So we've built out a number of tools for water sector utilities to use on their own or through technical assistance from EPA to better understand climate impact and how to adapt to it. So our Resilience Strategies Guide, or RSG, is an introduction type tool for climate resilience and adaptation planning for water sector utilities. It provides adaptation strategies based on the area of the country that you're in. It takes a look at what other utilities have done. And it also provides some funding options. So just as earlier, as Chris was talking about, whether it's BRIC or our state revolving funds, both clean water and drinking water, the WIFIA program, other state programs, one of the nice outputs of this tool is driving some of our users towards what are different funding options. We don't give them a gigantic long list, but we give them kind of, here are some key funding options to take a look at. And this also then provides a final report. So what a user will do as they walk through this process is identify the area of the country that they're in. The tool will then start to tell folks the types of climate impact that they should be concerned with, the types of adaptive measures that they should be thinking about. And then this report is kind of a basic information on what I just talked about, but it also sets up a utility to think through what might be a more in-depth analysis on climate impact. So this is just giving people like kind of the foundational information on what their potential future is going to look like and how to adapt to it. But if they so choose to do a more in-depth analysis, they can use another tool that we developed, which is called CREATE, or Climate Resilience Evaluation and Awareness Tool. So this is a full-on, all of our tools are web-based, but this is a full-on risk assessment tool for climate change for water sector utilities. There's 5 modules in the application, and I'll talk a little bit about each one of those. The first being climate awareness. So this is where utility comes in, identifies who they are, its financial standing, and each one of the modules provides a very short report after you completed it. In the case of the climate awareness module, it starts to provide projection data for the different types of climate concerns that the user might be concerned with. I'll talk about this data a bit more later on. There's a tremendous amount of climate projection data built into this tool, but we've also mapped it out, and I'll show you that in a bit. The second module is our scenario development module. So this is where a utility kind of starts to think through, based on its threats and the climate data that's provided, getting a better understanding of the risk at the utility. So they're designing a scenario to think through, okay, this is a particular asset or assets that I'm concerned with. This is my climate threat, kind of setting them up then to think through what the consequence on that particular asset or asset that they've chosen will be. Before I get into this module a bit, one of the things that I always like to stress for whether it's any of you or if you promote this tool for other users in New Jersey, we always want to say to our users, because I think there's this sort of natural inclination to want to assess every asset at a utility. And that typically is not a worthwhile effort, especially in the beginning. So we always say to folks, think about one or two assets at your utility that if it were impacted by some sort of natural disaster or whatever it might be, is that going to, from an economic standpoint, a public health standpoint, the ability to provide service, what asset or assets are going to have the most impact, so you can start to think through the process more clearly instead of considering many assets as you roll through. You can always easily go back and assess more. But in this consequence and assets module, this is where you start to think about, as I said, the different types of economic impacts, regulatory impacts, public health impacts, that if a particular asset that you've chosen is impacted by that natural disaster or climate impact, what is the result of that? So loss of service, economics, regulatory problems or enforcement, things of that nature. So it's that module of the tool is incredibly interesting. I think it takes a lot of thought. You can kind of breeze through it if you want, but that's where we always seem to have the most conversation, especially in our technical assistance exercises. And it's always fascinating. So after you've kind of set the stage for what those potential consequences are, you want to think about, okay, well, how am I going to adapt? I might already have some existing adaptive measures in place, or I may want to implement new ones. So you start to identify and build out plans based on the consequence and assets in the third module. And the tool does provide a tremendous amount of financial data for the implementation of physical adaptive measures. If you have your own data, you can easily override our data. That goes also for the climate data that's built into the tool. There are some utilities that are very progressive, or states that have a tremendous amount of climate data, or even some regulatory processes where they're requiring a utility to look at particular data. So if that's the case, you can override our climate data. And then the last module in the tool is our risk assessment module. And this is where you start to pull everything together. So you've built the plans out in the fourth module, and now what you're getting in the fifth module is the result of all of your work, which is a cost comparison of the different plans that you've built out. So you can take a look at, because the dollars are the drivers for utilities in most cases here. Certainly, I understand that utilities are concerned with public health impacts, but they've got to be able to sell how they're going to implement these adaptive measures. So the dollar always tends to be the driver. So you start to do a cost comparison of the different plans that you've built out to ensure that they're a worthwhile effort, or it may be the case that you were going to do work anyway. So there's, very little extra effort or funding that is needed to do some work with some small changes. Or you could be planning out for what might be 10, 15 years over time, and getting a BRIC grant or a WIFIA grant or whatever it might be to implement that. We also provide, which I always find, or utilities find very useful, is the cost of inaction. So if something were to occur and you didn't take action, what is that going to cost the utility? So a tremendous amount of information in the tool. It is usable on your own. I'm really doing the tool a disservice by trying to give a very quick overview here. We have a tremendous amount of training built out on our website, and certainly if any of you are interested in more information, don't hesitate to reach out to me on the tool itself, or any of the work that I'm talking about. This pop-up here is just an example of one of the one of the reports that comes out of each of the modules. This is the climate awareness report. So you can see here some data that's built out for the current climate data that's in the tool. We're actually going to be updating that. So right now we have data for two different time periods, 2035 and 2060, and we are in the process of updating that information to two new time periods, 2050 and 2090. I'm hoping by the fall that information will be not only built into this tool, but also released to the public. When we built this tool out 15 years ago, 2035 seemed pretty far away. It's not very far away anymore, which is kind of fascinating to me as I get older. I want to talk about some of the data we have, and I'm not going to go into great detail on this, but I'll use our climate projections map as kind of an example for all this. But we've mapped out a lot of data up on EPA's website. So we have stream flow projection data. We have snowpack, which is not an issue for New Jersey. Storm surge and storm surge and inundation map, which also includes hurricane data, the FEMA flood zones. So a lot of great information there. That is not climate projection data, but it's historical data. We have wildfire conditions, again, likely not an issue for New Jersey, and then our climate projection scenario map. So I'm just going to kind of go through this quickly to get to the climate projections map, but these are just screenshots of each one of the different tools. This is probably interesting for you to see from the storm surge map. This is, you can see the types of data along the coast that are provided based on storm surge. As I said, there's the FEMA flood zones. We have the real-time advisories for hurricanes built in there. That's background from NOAA, and then hurricane frequency. So take a good look at that one. I know folks in New Jersey will be really interested in that. And then we get to, and I'll use this as an example of not only our climate data and talk about it a bit more, but also how all of these tools work. So again, Esri based, you can come in and you can just start clicking around the map, or you can go to the search bar and type in a zip code or an address, and it'll start to pull up information for you on projection data. As I talked about, we have currently two time periods built into this map, 2035 and 2060. You can see that over here. And we provide data for three different scenarios. So we are not providing one number for a user. We're providing a range of potential futures so that utilities can think through, build different scenarios, and then adapt to the particular scenario that they are most concerned with. So we have a hot, dry scenario, a central scenario, and a warmer, wetter scenario for the two different time periods. We provide information on temperature, precipitation, the intensity of storms, extreme heat, and then sea level rise. So again, we're working on updates to all of this data. Currently, these maps, this map in particular, is built out in half-degree grid cells. We're actually going down to a 1/16 of a degree grid cell when we update this map, because so much more data has become available. This is all based off of the 5th National Climate Assessment and other federal resources based on climate data. So, and we've worked with many, many partners to ground truth how we serve up this data, but we wanted to serve it up in a manner that's easily understandable to users. And for any of you that have a climate science background or are interested, you can go to the technical details for more of an explanation of where the data comes from and what it is. And then we have a methodology guide that explains all the data in tremendous detail. So if you really want to get into that, you certainly can. It's a tough document to read, but it's got a tremendous amount of information in it. So those are our maps. Those are our tools. Oh, this is a screenshot of just if you click on precipitation, what it's going to look like for a particular area of the country. I can't see this morning. My apologies. I can't see what part of the country is. I should have pulled up a New Jersey slide there, but you can just see how it's served up in different degree grid cells. Yeah, and so you can see the types of projection data again that's provided by this map. Also, all of that data that's built into this map and is also built into Create is available for download off of EPA's website. So we have a data access page, so you can go in and download all this data in Excel spreadsheets if you want to use it. So there's just a screenshot of what you get. And then one of the other things that we're trying to do with our work is to build an environmental justice. So it's a priority of the administration. Certainly, it's an important aspect of what we all do. So we're focusing in on smaller and underserved communities. We've built out this map to get a better understanding of equity and kind of how to incorporate that. And we're doing our best to try to incorporate that into our technical assistance conversation. So if anybody's interested in talking more about that, one of my fellows is working on this, and I will get you in touch with them. And then this is just kind of a rundown of how we try to incorporate environmental justice into our technical assistance work. And then, as I talked about earlier with our technical assistance, and I'll take a little bit of time here. I'm looking at the clock. I think I'm close to the end here, but we are trying our best to build in funding components to the work that we do. And so when we do our technical assistance exercises, we bring in funders from states, federal, different federal agencies, and we make connections for utilities so that they can better seek funding for those adaptive measures. So we do a tremendous amount of work with BRIC. They've been a phenomenal partner. You can use a lot of these funds, one funding program against another for the matches that are sometimes required under BRIC, under the WIFIA program, SRFs or loans. So I think that I'm not an expert in funding, but we do bring in the experts into our technical assistance work. And then this is my contact information, or my entire team's contact information. So you'll have this again. I'll share this PowerPoint so you can access me or any of the resources that I talked about. So I'm going to stop there and see if there are any questions.